Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. I'm Sam Peck, the Executive Director of Family Councils of Ontario, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to what is hard to believe is the last guest speaker session of our June 2022 virtual conference, Regroup, Refocus, Recharge. It's been a whirlwind of a month with lots of great sessions to mark Seniors Month and Family Council Week. And today we are going to hear from our last guest speaker before our closing social next week. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which I'm coming to you from. I'm based in Hamilton, which is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. FCO is a province-wide in scope remote team. So we encourage everyone we work with to learn about the land that they're based on and to think about the ongoing legacy of colonialism and what meaningful reconciliation can mean. There's a great website, native-land.ca. You can type in your address and learn a lot about the territories your home is situated on. As this month is Indigenous History Month, we hope you'll mark this month by learning more about the Indigenous peoples of your community and their history. And consider adding a land acknowledgement to your council meetings to really remind everyone of our shared commitment to reconciliation and connection with Indigenous peoples. The work non-Indigenous communities and individuals and organizations need to do towards meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is a long-term journey. It's specific to each individual, and it's constantly evolving for us and other organizations. But we welcome you to join us on our journey. Before we get into today's session, I want to let you know that we've posted a link to a survey on intergenerational programming. So we want to get your council's thoughts, actions, feelings around intergenerational programming within long-term care. So if you or your council is currently thinking about or working on any intergenerational programming, or it's not on your radar at all, that's useful for us to know. Fill out the survey or let us know in the session chat. But now I'd like to introduce today's session speaker, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Leanne Palisi, to the virtual stage.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And today we have a great afternoon planned, and we are privileged, and I am honored to be able to introduce today's guest speaker, Deborah Bakti, the author of Now What? Managing the Emotional Journey in Long-Term Care for Families. Deborah Bakti worked as an executive in seniors care for 11 years. And during that time, she became a resident's family member 3 times with her husband, mom, and dad. That life-changing experience inspired her to leave her corporate career to start her company, Think Breakthrough, to change and support the organizations that assist families with the biggest concern in aging. Now What, her latest book, also aptly titled Now What, is written to support people with their emotional journey of becoming a resident's family member and equip the seniors' care homes to develop a trusting and compassionate care partnership with their new family members. Here at FCO, we are really excited about a collaborative project that we're working on with Deborah. Some of you might have seen the videos that have been posted on our YouTube channels in collaboration with Deborah's book on giving family members tools and guidelines on how to have them be better equipped to manage those emotions on admission day. We're really excited to be able to collaborate this with Deborah, and this project is part of a bigger project that FCO is working on in terms of developing a brochure or an information package for family members. And our hope is to answer all the questions that family members didn't even know they had prior to entering long-term care. So we're really excited to be able to work with Deborah on this, and we're hopeful, that families will be better equipped to manage that emotional journey. So without further ado, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Deborah Bakti.
Thanks so much, Leanne and Sam, and hello, everybody. I'm super excited to be here and to be partnering with Family Councils Ontario. As we're going to be talking today about this, how we can help residents' families with their emotional journey into long-term care. Those of you as Family Council members probably remember what that admission day was like for you when you brought your loved one into long-term care. And so a lot of the work that I do, specifically with my latest book, Now What? Managing the Emotional Journey of Long-Term Care for Families, is I support seniors care organizations and their leadership and their frontline staff to equip them on how they can be building trust in that partnership dynamic with new and existing families, as well as being able to effectively manage the expectations that we as families on behalf of our residents have. And so it's this unique position that I have because, like Leanne said, I worked in seniors care at the executive level for 11 years. And it was during that time that I was thrust into the role of family member, first with my dad going into long-term care when he had Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia, and he passed away in 2011. And then the second situation was with my husband, who got diagnosed with an extremely rare disease in his early 60s. And I became a resident's wife for the 4 years that he lived in long-term care before passing away in 2015. My third experience was with my mom, and she started in retirement living and then moved into assisted living. And she passed away in 2019 there. And actually, I've been a family member 4 times because Ty's mom, my mother-in-law, celebrated her 100th birthday in long-term care in February, and then a couple of months later passed away. So I made this big decision to leave my corporate career and start my own business because I really wanted to work with both sides of this conversation and this key relationship with families, having been one of those family members and have gone through the experience. And that's what Now What really is about. And so clients that I work with are providing copies of Now What to their new family members as they bring them on board. So I'm going to share a couple of key concepts that I think really apply for both the care providers in the home, the staff, as well as families. And this idea of take the lead and be the guide your families need and want. If you think back to when you first became a family member, or when you meet new family members, they're lost. They don't know how things work. And so it's part of what I saw with Now What was to be that guidebook, that being able to provide a bit of a roadmap. And for people that work in family council, you've got a lot of experience and knowledge that you can share. So, and when I talk to care team providers in the homes, I say the families are looking for you to take the lead and be the guide. And we're going to talk about some 3 specific gaps that occur right now that when we're able to close those gaps, allow us to be able to build that foundation of trust, respect, and partnership that we're really looking for. The second is around build your culture on the way in, one family at a time. From a business perspective with long-term care, they have ongoing new residents moving in, being admitted with their families as a part of that family unit. And some homes, they have new admissions every week. And so you can imagine how the culture changes when you have new families coming in, existing families who are no longer a part of the community because their loved one has passed away or they have been relocated. So a lot of the work that I do is about how do you design a welcome, intentional, onboarding, for lack of a better word, experience so that it isn't just an admission process. I wrote in both of my books about how I felt that my admission day with my husband, it was rushed, it was transactional. I felt like we were widgets on a production line. And that really what sparked the inspiration for my first book, as far as Recipe for Empathy, to help homes to understand that what families are experiencing, this is a big deal day. This is not something that we signed up for as family members for our loved one. And so by being able to be intentional with that, and as a family council, you also have the opportunity to build the culture within your home community on the way in, one family at a time. I want to talk for a couple of minutes about this term I coined called admission anxiety. And what I recognized with the work that I was doing with homes was that actually both sides of this new relationship experience admission anxiety. For obvious reasons, families coming in 2-3 days previously, you get the phone call that you've been approved, there's a bed available, and we know right now the wait list is over 40,000 Canadians or Ontarians. And so then it's the day of, and driving to the home and not knowing what to expect, and all the anxiety and the emotion and the worry and the guilt and the grief. And then sometimes we feel a bit of that relief because now we have support, and then we feel guilty about feeling relieved. And everything's happening so fast over 3 or 4 hours, lots of paperwork and processing and people and all of the policies, and so much to take in. What I didn't really realize until working with frontline staff was that they also feel admission anxiety, just for a different reason. They've not yet met your loved one, their new resident. What they know about them is just based on paperwork that may not be fully accurate or up to date, and they don't know the family. They actually really worry about, what's the family going to be like? Are they going to be nice? Are they going to be easy to deal with? Are they going to be challenging? Where are they at? So there's actually common ground in this concept of admission anxiety that's coming from both sides. So I referred earlier to 3 gaps. So I want to break those down for you. The first is the knowledge gap. And what I mean by that is with the families and the care team meeting each other. Let's start with the care team. The care team know their home. They know their people, processes, policy, protocols, their culture. They know how things work. They know the place like the back of their hand. They know all the residents. They know the families. They know the vendors. They know the office politics. So they're very comfortable with the home. A family coming in doesn't know any of that. It may be the first time as a family member that they've even stepped into a long-term care home. And so you've got this knowledge disconnect because the family knows everything about their loved one, what they like, what they don't like, what their habits, what their preferences are, what their interests are. And families, we also know about our dynamics, and I'm also going to say dysfunction, because what family doesn't have a little bit of dysfunction, right? And sometimes that comes into the relationship as well. So this knowledge gap exists, and both sides are trying to figure out as much as they can in understanding the other. So that's the knowledge gap. The best way that we can close that knowledge gap is going to ease some of that admission anxiety, and we know it's not going to happen all on the first day. And it's important that when I talk to the staff that I train is that families don't know what they don't know, and it's not your fault as a family member. The healthcare system is incredibly complex. The seniors care sector within the healthcare system is also incredibly complex with lots of moving parts, constant daily changes almost it seems, and COVID certainly didn't help with that. So I try to remind the staff that families don't know what they don't know. I had a family member say, well, I thought the administrator was like the head secretary of the home. And she goes, and then when I found out that it was actually the person who was running the home, I was kind of surprised about that. Sometimes we have to remember families don't know what they don't know, and it's not their fault. The second gap is the emotion gap. And as I alluded to earlier, that admission anxiety that families feel and the levels and depths of emotion that they feel or not, because sometimes when we're in that task-oriented managing somebody's care, sometimes we kind of stuff down all of the emotions that we're feeling because we don't have time to get emotional about it. I took care of my husband while working full-time and raising our 2 kids for 3 years, home care, adult daycare, 27 different specialists, hundreds, if not thousands of medical appointments. And so I was just on autopilot. And it wasn't until, a few days and things sinking in that the emotion that I was feeling, the loss that I was feeling, the guilt that I was feeling, particularly when you have people saying, did you really have to put your husband into a long-term care home? And the relief that I felt that I had some people that were helping me out. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that feeling guilty about feeling relieved about it. For the staff, they probably are in an average size home could have anywhere from 1 to 3 new residents being admitted every week. And they can't possibly go to that place of that emotion. Empathy, yes. So part of that, meeting the family where they are, but they also, sometimes they probably feel like they're trying to fit in an admission into an already busy day. So there's this disconnect with where they are emotionally. And what I share with them is this: when people feel concerned, it's hard to imagine a better future. And so a new family coming in, they can't see around the corner that care team members can to see how things can actually benefit their loved one with the care that they're providing, with the meals that they're able to be served, with the activities, right? There's all those positives, but on that admission day, all we can focus on is, I can't imagine a better future here. The other key point is that they're not just meeting the family, they're meeting your grief. And sometimes how the grief shows up is, if any of you have ever had, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but a disproportionate reaction maybe to a situation, that fear, that worry, that anger, that frustration, a lot of times that's grief. And in the Now What book, there's a chapter that I had Edie Nathan, who is a therapist and a grief expert, write about, so that, because sometimes families, we don't even realize that it's grief that we're feeling. Sometimes we associate grief with somebody passing away. But as you know, when you've got a loved one living in long-term care, there is still loss, and that contributes to the emotion gap. I refer to this in the Now What book, and it may be a little small to see, but I created this, thank you. I created this poster about the porch, and we were actually doing a book club with the family, and I was on as a guest, and she said, I really love the porch acronym that you have, and when I feel overwhelmed, I just say, try going to the porch. So I said, I'm going to create a poster that says that, because it really is about when we've got so much going on, and as caregivers, to be able to take that moment, take that beat and pause, observe what's really going on, reflect on the situation, and then be able to choose, how do I want to respond in that situation, to be able to regulate back the emotions, to really understand the situation at hand. And then what are you doing to, when I say make it happen, the decision, the action that you're taking. The third gap is what I call the identity gap. And this, I think, is probably one of the most significant pieces in trying to get settled into our new role as a family member. And what I mean by that is, we look at this relational triangle. And so you have your loved one, who is now the home's new resident, as the top of the triangle. That's the key person. And now we've got the care team along with the family. Whereas previously, before they moved into long-term care, you were the primary caregiver, the POA, maybe you had home care and other supports, but typically you're the main person that's providing the care for them. Now, all of a sudden, you're in a home, in a community where there are so many people, so many departments that are there to support and provide that safe, quality care environment for your loved one. And so this idea of understanding that our identity is changing. And you're not giving up control of your loved one's care. You're taking on a new role as a partner in care. And I almost wish that somebody handed me a job description to say, as of today, this day, your job description has changed. And you don't have to bear the weight of the world with your husband's care on your shoulders. We are here. We've got you. Yes, there's a learning curve that we have, but you now have a team because I have a new role as a partner in care. And I want to read to you just a short excerpt from an email that I received from a family member that really brings this to life. She says, reading Now What helped me to think about and understand the other side of the coin when we are adjusting to having placed a loved one in long-term care. It helped me to better figure out how to deal with things now that my mom was not in my care anymore. At first, all I could see when I visited mom was that they weren't caring for her the same way I had been doing at home. Your book brought to light that I was not the only one getting used to this new norm. I hadn't thought about the staff having to get to know mom and figure out how they best could care for her. And I love this part because she just was so real. She said, it really helped me to get over myself and focus on the positives of what goes on in a long-term care home. It's not perfect, but they do a much better job of looking after my mom than I could ever do now that she is at the stage she has reached in her life, 98 and well into dementia. And I had the pleasure of meeting Shirley on a town hall call. And when she described that, she said, I was driving the staff crazy because I kept saying, you're not doing it the way that I did it. And she doesn't like it like that. And for her to be able to have that transformation in her awareness, she, after 7 months, was able to actually take a vacation to be away from her mom for a couple of weeks because she knew that she kind of needed to let her guard down. And she needed to accept what she, in her words, what she said to me was, they weren't caring for my mom the way that I was, but the way that they were caring for my mom was still good. It was just different. And how can we possibly expect care team members to take care of our loved one exactly the way that we would? And so I think that really speaks to that identity gap. So I invite you to be thinking about, as family council members, how can you help reduce admission anxiety for families, residents, and care team members? Because all the individuals here, including your loved one, the resident, is having admission anxiety. This is a big change on so many levels for your loved one and for you as a family. And it's a change and a new beginning for the care team. And they really want to get to know you and your loved one as best as possible so that they can, through their learning, be able to provide the best care. And how can you help close the knowledge, emotion, and identity gaps with families? When you think about when you're meeting a family and if they're expressing some worry or concern or fear, to think about, is this a knowledge gap? Is this an emotion gap? Or is it an identity gap that this person is struggling with that you may be able to help them with? The next section that I want to cover is the 7 A's. It's a section in Now What, where I realized with my own personal journeys and talking to lots and lots of other family members that we go through these different stages, and it's not linear, although I do think that we tend to start at that stage of awareness. And it's being aware that white knuckling it and providing the care, and sometimes we're duct taping together a care program, isn't going to work. And the hard part with long-term care, and I actually wrote this in how I start the book in the introduction, I say, when I get old and can't take care of myself, I want to live in a nursing home with a bunch of people I don't know, said no one ever. So we understand that. We know that 97% of Canadians want to age in place in their home. However, sometimes that's not possible. And it takes a bit of that awareness that this is not sustainable and we need to look for more help. And then going through that stage of being able to acknowledge and moving into the adapting. I've had some family members say that they are currently in that stage of adapting. It's a new routine. It's a new place. It's new people. All of these things that we need to learn to adapt, to really integrate that into our life. Because as you will remember, when your loved one moved into long-term care, your life changed as well, with things that you were no longer required to do, as an example, or do differently. And sometimes that opens up space in our life that we can almost feel uncomfortable with. And then being able to accept, and I say in the book, we don't have to like something in order to accept it. But if we kind of like, oh, and we resist, then that's what can make it difficult and actually create some of that emotional angst when we're fighting against it. With the allow, I just want to read a short excerpt from that section, because to me, allowing is being able to get around that corner to see that this new environment and these new relationships, to be able to allow that to be, again, versus the resisting it, can be really helpful. Ty was a handsome and charming gentleman, one of the many reasons that I married him, actually. And he maintained those qualities even during his illness. He was extroverted, loved being with people and participating in the home's activities. Bingo night became one of his rituals. He made everyone laugh, and he was just super fun to be around. One evening after work, I swung by the home to visit him. We had argued the night before, and yes, even through illnesses, couples can still fight. And I wanted to pop in to see how he was doing. In the main entrance area, the bingo tables were set up, and Ty was sitting with a group of ladies. It had become clear to me that he had shared our friction-filled conversation from the night before. They were all on Ty's side, and as I walked toward his table, I got the stink eye from the entire group of elderly women. When I look back on this event, I realized that I was in a place of allowing. I could see the humor in the situation. I could appreciate that he was making friends. It was really nice to see him getting more involved with the activities and the events that the home offered. He didn't need me there as often, and sometimes I even wondered if I was cramping his style. I wondered if he'd rather be going to the home's pub night and enjoying a beer with his buddies. So it's having that opportunity when those things happen. I mean, I went through a period of time where I was like, what do you mean he doesn't need me here? And he was creating his own experiences without me. And that was the part about allowing. The chapter on accountable, I really talk about how as family members, we have an accountability in how we show up in the home, in the community. And it's like the quote that take responsibility for the energy that you bring into this space. And the accountability to be able to bring forth concerns and questions in a way that is collaborative versus combative, which I'm the first to put my hand up and say, I've been there, so no judgment here. But really being able to build in, going back to the identity and the role of a new community member. And as family council members, you have an opportunity to model and be able to take the lead and be the guide with families on how to best embrace that accountability. And then the last is around being able to appreciating the staff, appreciating some of the new opportunities, new connections that you're able to make. So I'm going to switch gears and jump over to family flavors. There's a chapter called What's Your Family Flavor? And truth be told, I almost didn't include this chapter in the book because I was worried that maybe some families would feel offended. And I thought about it a lot, and I thought, I see my role. I've got the vantage point of having been a seasoned family member, as well as understanding the business. And I wanted to be able to equip families with as much information and insight as possible. And so I really believe that this would be a benefit for families to have. And I've had a few families reach out and say it's actually their favorite chapter. So when I looked at my own experience and a lot of the families that I've spoken with, is that I thought kind of come across three typical kind of basic flavors. And the first I would describe as the sweet and savories. And those are the families that are very engaged. There's probably a lot of sweet and savories on this call. If you're involved in family council, you know the staff, you know the management. Sometimes sweet and savories know more about what's going on in the home than the staff in the home themselves. They are well liked and appreciated, and when those families come in, you can see the smile on the staff's face. They want to know how the dog's birthday party went over the weekend. You know a lot about each other. They are deeply ingrained in the culture there. Probably the majority of families in an average home are what I call the salt and peppers. And the salt and peppers, they kind of go with the flow. They may not be there as often. It may be they can't because they're physically not located closely enough, or they've got a lot of other priorities that are happening. They do connect. I would have considered myself on average a salt and pepper. I was probably in the home some weeks only once or twice, depending on my work schedule. Other times more frequently. I knew who to connect with, but generally speaking, I was just kind of there, and not everybody would have seen me coming in and out. The third group is what I call the jalapenos, and like the name, they can be a little spicy. And sometimes families can come in with a bit of that, let's call it the jalapeno bias. Maybe they're coming in, they've read a lot of information in the news, they've already have a bias toward or a fear of everything that they've heard about long-term care, the stigma. They've got their own narrative about it. Could also be that they are in a large family and they didn't support the decision to put their mom in long-term care. So there's some of that can come in with it. Jalapenos tend to be the smallest representation in a home, but they take up a lot of the staff's time because of wanting to have a lot of issues that they're bringing up. And so they can be some challenging conversations. So in the book, I talk about, these are some signs if you're being perceived as a jalapeno by the staff. And I will also want to say, it doesn't mean that jalapeno families are always that way. I say, primarily a salt and pepper. I had my sweet and savory moments, but I had my jalapeno moments too. So just like anything, as human beings, we can be going along, minding our business, something happens, and all of a sudden we're like, wow, I really felt triggered by that. So it's part of it is to understand, and in some homes where they're using the book, a family member will say to a staff, I'm sorry, I'm just having a bit of a jalapeno moment right now. It brings a bit of levity to it. And it's not to take away that there are legitimate concerns, but it's a way to be able to self-monitor. And am I coming across as a jalapeno, which could get in the way of actually getting this situation resolved? I would say anytime I've consulted with families, if they're having a conflict or they've got a complaint or an issue, or a home contacts me to ask for my assistance in really breaking down the issue, I would say the main root cause of the conflict and that fractured relationship is unmet expectations. And this formula, disappointment equals expectations minus reality. And I think that it's something that I think about quite often. And any given day, even outside of your role as a family council member and a family member, we're constantly creating expectations in our mind. I had an expectation earlier today when I was at another function that I would be able to find my car. That was a bit of a journey. So of course, it didn't align with reality, and I was feeling disappointment and a little bit afraid that, I'm not gonna be able to find my car and get back here. So it's important when we think about the expectations that we are setting, and also if they're realistic. And I just want to share with you, Brene Brown, if any of you are familiar, this is her latest book, Atlas of the Heart. And she has a different definition that says, disappointment is unmet expectations. The more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment. So think about that from a family member perspective, and you have an expectation that your mom is never going to have a fall in the long-term care home. And one day you get a phone call from the nurse to let you know that your mom had a fall. Well, if the expectation was that that was never going to happen, and I hear this a lot, but I thought that the home had 24/7 one-on-one care. Where were you when my mom had a fall? That never should have happened, right? There's misconceptions. It's an unrealistic expectation that somebody would never have a fall and would be constantly monitored and watched by a care provider. So this is a really important aspect in the training that I do with homes, or even when I'm talking to families, to understand, where did that expectation come from? And what is that expectation rooted in, and how much does it align with the reality of the situation? Because nobody wants to feel disappointed about things. And it aligns with, in Recipe for Empathy, my first book, one of the E's is around expectations, that we're clear on what they can expect from us and what we can expect from them. I encourage families and care teams to get together and have what I call an expectations conversation. A good place to start is with Now What, where I've listed 20 misconceptions, the most popular misconceptions that families have that I'm working to clarify. And I suggest have the family read the misconceptions, highlight the ones that they want to have a discussion about. The more that we can clarify that, and as a family member, to be able to say, as my new partners in care, my care team partners, this is what I expect from you. Because if they don't know what your expectations are, as best as you can formulate them as you learn about long-term care and the environment, then at least you're going to be able to reduce that level of disappointment that can happen. Another piece to consider is how you can bring curiosity into the conversations with care teams, particularly if you're feeling frustrated or disappointed. As human beings, we are hardwired to make snap judgments. We do it all day long. When we see something, we're deciding, we're judging. And sometimes that can be kind of judgmental, or we jump to conclusions, right? The narrative. And so what I suggest, and I try to practice this every day myself, is rather than making a judgment about why I think something happened, is to be able to be curious and say, I wonder what happened, or I wonder why that got missed. I wonder what their perspective on this situation is. It's difficult, if not impossible, to be judgmental and curious at the same time. And yeah, you can go home and try this with your friends and family, or if you've got kids, because it definitely shifts the energy. And this is all about how do we build stronger personal relationships in our personal lives, as well as even with family council. When you're having your meetings and maybe there's a disagreement or not seeing things in the same light, to be able to say, tell me more about why you think that way, bringing that sense of curiosity. So I want to invite you to think about how you can share your knowledge and experience. You've been on this road for a while, and sometimes it's almost hard for us to think back to when we were brand new. And if you think back to that very first day when you walked through those front doors with your loved one, how the home looked and felt, and think about when you've got new families coming in with their loved ones, that's what they're coming in and seeing and experiencing, and the emotions that they may be feeling. And as family council members, it's a real opportunity to be part of that conversation and welcoming them into a community. And ideally, as things are opening up a bit more and there's more opportunity for families to be able to get together face to face and meet each other, there's a lot of families out there that are looking for that connection. So there's 6 ways, and I know that this slide's a bit busy, but I'll break them, each of them down. How you can support your families. Let them know they are not alone, so that they feel seen and heard. This almost seems kind of counterintuitive. Of course they're not alone. How many people do we have living in long-term care? But it always amazes me when someone's either read Now What, or they've been in a book club, or they've talked to their families to say, I thought I was the only one. And it felt so lonely on that feeling lost. So there are ways that you can let them know that they're not alone, and they do have a supportive community there that will help them on the journey. What they're feeling is normal. Families who say, I didn't want to say anything about that because I was afraid that people would judge me. You know, if I said I felt relieved, and then I felt guilty about feeling relieved, or even saying out loud that you feel guilty. So letting them know that whatever it is that they're feeling, it's normal. There's other people who feel exactly the same way. And to let families know they have agency over their presence, right? They're family flavors. They do have agency over how they choose to show up. And if there are ways that you can help them to problem solve and look at conflict in a way that can work collaboratively versus that combative, that can sometimes happen and really fracture relationships that are so key in the home. They can make the suboptimal reality work for their family. Sometimes families, we can just get so stuck in, but this is not what I wanted. This is not what I signed up for. Ty and I, we didn't sign up for this, as we were approaching almost 30 years of marriage together with 2 kids. But the reality is this was our new normal. And we also were dealing in a suboptimal time in our healthcare system, right? There's a lot of things that are happening, from recruiting and all these different political issues, that we just can't solve today, but we can make it work to the best of our ability in this suboptimal situation and time. Their role in the relational triangle is important and valued. And I think sometimes families almost feel like afraid. Oh, I don't want to call. I don't want to bother the staff. I know that they're really busy, and they don't know what they don't know, and they're in that identity gap. So being able to help them to, how do you want to show up? What is your role? How can you really step into that partner in care with the new care team and build relationships and those moments that matter with them? And helping them clarify and adjust expectations. This is so key. I mean, if we could tackle that, as far as having realistic, manageable, achievable expectations that everybody knows, a lot of the conflict and the challenge that you're facing, it can help to lessen that. So I think there's a real opportunity around that. So this is a picture of a book club package. I want to just take a few minutes to talk about the book club that we have started in a lot of different homes. And so in my organization, we've created a slide deck, a participant guide, a facilitator guide, and we're also creating templates for email invites, and basically a cut and paste. We want to put all the tools together and provide train the trainer if homes or family council are looking for that. The structure that we have is that it can be done over 4 weeks, can be done over Zoom. That's why we've got the slide deck, or can be done in person. Some homes are looking at doing that in their garden in the summer. Some families are really appreciating Zoom because it just gives them more flexibility. But we've seen them run as 4 weekly or bi-weekly 90-minute sessions. And I think some of the benefits that families have been experiencing is sometimes this is the only time that they've actually talked about how they felt on that admission day. And they get validated by other family members going, I felt that too. Yeah, I sobbed all the way home, driving home in my car. And so it starts to build that community that we've been missing for so long. And working through material that is very easy to read. The book only takes 2 hours to read through, and are able to have discussion points. And what I hear is that they go the full 90 minutes, and sometimes they want to go longer. So there's an opportunity, when you think about from a family council perspective, to be able to work with the social worker, admissions coordinator, management at the home and say, got a full toolkit for you. Figure out, with some of them, they have a family member who's a co-lead with the social worker or admission coordinator. But really, you can make it what you want out of it to be able to have these kind of conversations and close the knowledge gap and the emotion gap and the identity gap in a very constructive and community-based type of environment that can be created. So to bring it back to where we started about 40 minutes or so ago, is these are all the ways to get on that roadmap to take the lead and be the guide that your families need and want. And I want to close just by sharing a little bit from the book in Final Thoughts. You've joined a club that perhaps you never anticipated being a member of, and yet here you are with the rest of us, learning as you go. When Ty became a resident, I couldn't possibly know he would live in the home for 4 years. At the time, his specialist deemed him palliative. We were told that his disease was incurable, degenerative, and fatal. Medical practitioners thought Ty would be lucky to survive another year, maybe 2. Knowing that each day was probably going to be the best he was going to feel, and that his physical and cognitive abilities would continue to decline, I myself needed to work through each of the 7 A's shared in this book. But I couldn't have done it on my own. Building a support team, both formal and informal, was a lifeline for me and my kids. As I shared earlier, it's important to be able to accept this new reality. Although that doesn't mean you have to like what's happening. I remember my therapist asking me, After Ty is gone and you look back at this time, how do you want to remember it? She asked me to consider how I wanted to feel. How did I want my kids to feel? As hard as it was to think about that, I really appreciated her questions. It gave me permission to lean into this experience. Whether I wanted to or not didn't matter. This was our reality. I realized I could choose to be angry, upset, sad, kicking and fighting all the way, or I could release all of that, accept what is, and make the best of it. I used her questions as guideposts to navigate what I was experiencing. I wanted to live with as little regret as possible. I wanted to be there for Ty with compassion and presence. I wanted to notice the little moments that mattered with him and his care team. I wanted to remember the tears of sadness as well as the tears of gratitude. I wanted to remember the hugs from the care team and leave them with a positive impression as they had with me. And I wanted to remember how I played a positive role to the best of my ability as a member in their community. I didn't get it right every time, but I did recognize that I had the ability to choose how I was going to respond to whatever was happening. The times I was able to do that didn't mean the sadness or the tears went away. What it did do was open up my ability to experience the happy moments, the funny moments, the heartfelt moments, and even the frustrating and the challenging moments, to remember the moments that mattered. Moments like helping Ty drink his thickened juice through a straw that I needed to hold for him, or feeding him his pureed dinner because he was at risk of choking. I could view it as a task, or I could view it as a privilege. I would sit with him while he watched TV and dozed off. For a moment, I could pretend it was just like our usual Friday night, or telling him he needed to turn the TV down in the community room because he was watching a mob movie with lots of violence and swearing, and the other residents just weren't having it. I could see the humor in Ty as a younger resident, creating a bit of a ruckus. Another time, staff told me that Ty has to stop hiding fruit in different drawers in the building because it'll attract ants. He was being crafty and resourceful. Or seeing Ty wearing someone else's shirt because the laundry got mixed up and he loved his new shirt. He was grateful to be the recipient of the mistake. Then there were the phone calls from the team members telling me that Ty had eloped again. And this is what care workers call it when a resident is exit seeking and escapes from the home. To wheel himself down to the local pub for a beer. Oh, I wish I had cut him more slack about those escapades. How you choose to react or respond to this new reality is a choice. With all of our relationship, the choice is always yours. And I will close with that, with many thanks and appreciation for the time that I've had with you today. And I think I will hand it back over to Sam and Leanne for any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for that incredible presentation, Deborah. I know that your work is helping many people, and I personally loved reading your book too. So maybe to kick it off with a question is, we hear from family councils that, they really want to do something to help new families, help families through their journey. But at the same time, they're overwhelmed. Like, what can we do? It'd be great to have one of us at every, admission welcome day, but that seems like a lot. So what would you suggest to councils who know that there's something that they can do to help their peers, but they're kind of overwhelmed with, what do we do? Where do we start?
Right. So I think something that I've seen that has worked really effectively is a phone call, a short phone call to the family. I've seen staff members do it, or family council can do it that evening, that first evening when the family member is going home, potentially by themselves to an empty house if it's a spouse. And just a quick call to say, from so-and-so from, and I'm part of the family council, I heard that your loved one has moved into our community. And I just want to see how you're doing. I'm a family member too, and I remember what that was like. That emotional connection at that moment when the family is probably at home going, oh, I'm afraid to call, and I don't know anybody, just to reach out. And it could just be a 5 to 10 minute call, I think is a great place to start.
All right. Great. Leanne, is there anything you wanted to build on or ask?
That exact statement is what I remembered the most when I heard you speak at an education session in terms of that follow-up with the family member. Because we tend to forget once the boxes are ticked off and the resident is admitted into the long-term care home and the care plans all done up, and all the medications have been ordered, and we provided as much information as we could to the family members. But we forget once they get in the car and drive back home, there is some emptiness and a loss. And having had that same experience, Deborah, that I shared with you in our promo video, having my dad in long-term care, I felt the same way. Even though I had all this experience and all this knowledge, you still feel there's a change. Something is different. Like tomorrow morning, things are going to be different.
Right.
And to have someone call you and say, how are you doing? Are you okay? I think really for family council members to be able to provide that emotional connection would make such a huge difference to new family members.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is overwhelming. It is just such an overwhelming experience. So let's say we want families to come to that admission day feeling more prepared, feeling like they have a better sense of what to expect. So having experience as on the staff side and also the family side, through your family experience, what was the most unexpected part of that day that you'd want families to be ready for?
I think I would recommend families book the day off work if they're working. Like, clear your agenda for the day. Understand that there are going to be lots of paper, lots of questions, and we can't get around it. So it's almost kind of preparing them to say, we've got a bunch of this stuff. If the home can do it before admission day, great, but a lot of times they can't because of the turnaround, and just say, we will push through it together. And I would almost say, you're going to have there's different segments. There's the clinical stuff, the paperwork, there's the administrative, the accounting, the finance stuff. Those aren't the most fun at all to need to go through. And we also want to make sure that the emotional connection is there as well. But I had no idea. I think I booked half a day, and I was planning on going to work in the afternoon, which I couldn't possibly do, right? You just want to know that. And also just to say to them, there's a lot that we're going to share with you that you're not even going to remember. And that's okay. And it really to say, this is going to feel very overwhelming, and that's okay. We've got you. We can. I think that just to so that they aren't feeling blindsided.
Absolutely. And so many families do feel blindsided. And even if they have an experience in one home and now they're caregiving in another home, there's differences there. Yeah. Leanne, back to you.
Yes, exactly. And it's okay to say, having worked in long-term care and doing the admission, I would say, if you see a family is overwhelmed and so emotional during the admission, and you're right, Deborah, it's okay to say, there's a lot of information and it's okay. And if we don't get through this today, tomorrow's another day. And to have that flexibility to be able to work with the family and the resident through the emotional process, and just give them that pause, that moment to breathe and, reconfigure everything in their head, and then move on to the next step, whether it be another form to sign or something like that. And absolutely. And having worn the other hat and the daughter hat, and having, my dad admitted to a long-term care home, it's so much information and you meet so many new people. I just remember all the different department heads coming to my dad's room and introducing themselves. 6 people in the room at the same time. I thought my head was going to explode. And it's just very overwhelming. So to have that sensitivity of, planning out the day so that you can have that one-on-one connection and really hear and see, the family member and the resident, and not, have so many bodies all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also add to that it's because sometimes on the staff side, their challenge is if families aren't showing up at the that 10 o'clock time frame. And so I say to them, then you need to explain to the family what's in it for them, why it's important, because they've got the staffing staggered, but it's also to make sure that the resident gets to have their lunch, particularly if they have medications that need to be taken with food. And so being able to see if you can get that commitment, because that can also send staff off a bit like, oh, they're late and that's going to push this back. And so now we've set both sides up for a lot of friction. But families aren't going to know that why 10 o'clock, if that's the time, is an important time for the whole organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's about that expectations piece.
Yeah.
Expectations minus reality is just ripe for conflict. So over explaining things without being condescending, of course, but really trying to get as much information into families' hands so they know what to expect. They know a little bit more about how to come prepared, and perhaps also that no one can ever be 100% prepared.
Right.
That's just impossible. So I want to ask one last question. And so for family councils who are sitting watching this live or the recording, and when you talk about the jalapeno families, and they're like, I know who that person is, because every group has them. It's normal. But what advice would you give to family caregivers, family council members who maybe find it frustrating to interact with that jalapeno person or during their jalapeno moments, but no, I can help this person? What advice would you give them for working with people having a jalapeno moment?
Well, I mean, that's a broad question we could do a whole session on. I also feel like that being curious and trying to understand where that person, what is triggering that response. It's almost like when you think about, it's almost like having a responsive behavior. Like when a resident has a responsive behavior, it's not because they're trying to be difficult. There's something else going on. So what's going on underneath the surface? I had a situation where staff was telling me that they were given the heads up that this family coming in were really rude. They were so rude. And she took the curious versus judgmental. And what she uncovered was the family was what we're going to call acting out, because they were so embarrassed and ashamed about their dad's responsive behaviors. This was new for them. And they were not coping well. And they felt like the staff were going to judge them. And this person was able to say to them, this is our business. And I know it's heartbreaking because this is not your dad. Tell me what your dad was like before. Like, engage in a conversation. That family was not being jalapeno. So I think if, to keep it simple, to try to be curious. And also we have to monitor, are we getting our back up? Are we getting reactive? Is that getting in the way of really hearing? And sometimes people just need to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And to, sort of be curious, be compassionate. Really, I'd add, be mindful of language. We're running a great anti-racism project, so I'm going to give a shout out to that. But one of the core components is actually nonviolent communication, is how to approach communication, not ignoring your own needs, but also being reflective of what the other person needs. So definitely great tips. It's hard to believe that our hour together has flown by. So Leanne, I'll hand it over to you for some closing remarks before I close out the session.
Thank you so much, Sam. Deborah, I'm a huge fan, and thank you so much for, spending the hour with us and answering these questions. And on behalf of the team of FCO and our attendees, our appreciation so much for you sharing your passion and your wisdom and your insights and your personal stories. It really means a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of you guys. So thank you for the opportunity.
I'll echo that, what Leanne has said, and how appreciative we are for for your work with us. And for those who haven't watched the videos already, check out our YouTube channel, follow Deborah on social media to check out the work that we've done based on Now What. So do check that out. You can also find more information about the book club if your council wants to hold one for your folks. Strongly encouraged. But in the meantime, make sure next week to come to our conference closing evening social featuring a magic show. Bring a deck of cards and you can follow along. It'll be super fun. But it's hard to believe it's already end of June and we're closing out our guest speaker sessions. Deborah, thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you so much. Follow us, follow FCO and Deborah on Twitter, Facebook, all your social media. Check out our website for the details of the upcoming closing social on Monday, the 27th. And until then, be safe, enjoy the sunshine, and we will see you then. Thanks so much, everyone.